I first really became interested in Darwin and the history of evolution when I was an undergraduate. And it struck me then that there was a lot that still wasn't known about the history of evolution and what a great change it was in the history of science. You went from the whole scientific community thinking that evolution was a crazy idea to that being completely reversed. And there were just a couple of people who had made this radical change in science. And so that's what made me really interested in finding out about them.
Is it possible to explain the gist of evolution?
Evolution is actually nothing special. There's nothing happening in evolution, anything different than what's happening in this room right now. This is it. This is life. Yes, I think one of the biggest problems with understanding evolution is that we tend to think of big events that take thousands of years, and then we say, I can't see that happening, so maybe it doesn't happen at all. But that's an unrealistic expectation. It's a bit like saying that a mountain cannot erode down to a lower level because I can see it happening. Well, but yes, because it's a process that takes thousands of years. So it's hard to appreciate a process that takes a long time on our time scale because we live very short lifetimes. So the trick is to explain how things work in our time scale first, how things in nature live or die because of their characteristics. And then once you understand that how these little differences between different organisms, different animals can make a difference between some living and some dying on our time scale, then you say, now reiterate that over a very long period of time. And that's how the process works. But it's hard to switch between the two timescales. Wallace looked at this and described it in his books as a scientific topic. He urged his fellow scientists to take this seriously as a matter for scientific investigation. Here is evidence, he said. We have writing appearing, flowers appear on tables, messages come from somewhere. This is evidence, he says, and it can't be explained by science as we now know it. So we should investigate it as scientists and discover new laws of nature and so forth, and widen our view of science to accept this. Well, the challenges are always finding out about things because it's so long ago, everyone's dead, and their world is gone. So trying to piece together a vanished, invisible world is very tricky. There are only little fragments of evidence left, which is why I was so excited to discover the newspaper database done by the National Library. What a gigantic treasure trove of information. It's absolutely amazing. And it's free. I mean, who could ask for more? A big pleasure for me is finding out something new, or finding out that something that we used to believe is different than we thought. That's always a huge pleasure. So, for example, people used to say that, well, Wallace and many, many other writers said that there were so many tigers in Singapore in those days that a person per day was killed. And everyone has repeated this story up until the present day. This has just been reprinted and reprinted. But it turns out that it wasn't true. It was just a legend that people told Wallace when he came to Singapore for a visit. So to find out that and many other things are different than we thought, that's always a huge pleasure for me because I feel like I'm doing some good. Because simply to repeat the old stories, there's not much value in that. To just simply repeat what old books said before you is not that important. The challenge is to go back to the original sources and read them for yourself and try to figure out what happened. And many things turn out to be exactly as you expected, but sometimes things will turn out to be different.
Traits like altruism and also moral uprightness are evolutionary traits. But I would have thought that if you are altruistic, you would sacrifice yourself to save others.
Well, that's exactly the question. Is it right or not? And it depends on which living thing you're talking about. So it just so happens that for many species to be selfish and nudge everyone else out is the right thing to do, and they will have more offspring and they will do better. But in some social species, in which you have social groups, in which the society, your group, is composed of your relatives, that selfish strategy actually does not work best over the long term. I can't think of anything that I would want to tell Darwin or Wallace. What I would want to do is ask them questions. I would want to interview them, because there's so many things about their time and their lives and the sources for their ideas that we can only guess at, or that we can try to piece together. But if we could ask them, that would be very interesting. But I have a feeling it would be a difficult conversation, because people from long ago were different from us. It's not just that they spoke and wrote differently, they thought differently. So it would be challenging but fun. The note was not in the medium's handwriting. Therefore, it must have been written by a ghost. What? How can that be good evidence that a ghost wrote it? Because it's in different handwriting?